Please welcome Maris Blechner. Come on!
I used to be a high school English teacher, and so words are very important to me. You know, words have a tremendous amount of power, good or bad, and you have to be so careful about the words that you choose. In my life, there are certain words that have tremendous significance, and that's really the heart of what I want to tell you about. I met my husband in college, and when we were dating, we found out that each of us had a cousin who had an adopted child. And each of us had already made a life plan that included adoption. So when we decided to get married, we knew just what we were going to do. We were going to have a bunch of kids, and then we would absolutely adopt. Sometimes, though, life does not work out the way you expect. When we first got married, I didn't want to have kids yet. My husband was in school, and I was working, and I loved my work. Then eventually, I wanted to have kids, and I couldn't get pregnant. It was really hard. It took a very long time. Finally, I got pregnant. I had a wonderful pregnancy, but the baby had birth defects and died at birth. Not a good thing. Hospitals today are far more sensitive than they used to be when a baby dies. In those days, I didn't see the baby. I never held him or said goodbye. We named him, my husband and I, and we made arrangements to bury him because that's what you do. But there I was in the hospital, devastated. All around me were flowers and balloons and mothers and their babies. And I went home with no baby, back into my neighborhood where it looked like everybody was a young couple having children. It was just awful. I felt so disconnected. Well, now I wanted to have a baby more than ever, and I still couldn't get pregnant. So I went back to teaching. And then one day, there was one of those moments, you know, the ones that change the whole rest of your life forever? I was teaching, and the teacher came in from next door, and she said to me, Maris, I have to leave early because my brother and sister-in-law just adopted a baby from Seattle, and I want to go see the baby. Well, that was it for me. I went home and I said to my husband, well, we said we were going to adopt someday anyway. Here's our chance. How about if we find out what that couple did, and maybe we can adopt a baby now? He was fine with that, and I did it. I spoke to the sister-in-law, and I spoke to the adoption attorney in Seattle, and 6 months later, we got a call to come and pick up our newborn baby daughter. It was an incredibly exciting time. We flew to Seattle on a Sunday. I couldn't hold the baby till Monday after we went to court, but I could see her. So there we were. The attorney took us to the hospital, and my husband and I were walking down the corridor to get to the big nursery window. And I knew I had to warn him because I'm the oldest of 4, and he's the younger of 2, and really didn't know anything about babies. So I said to him, listen, newborn babies are not always pretty. In fact, sometimes they're really funny looking. But it's okay. They get better. Just be prepared. And sure enough, we got to the window of the nursery, and there in front of me were 5 of the ugliest babies I had ever seen. I didn't care. I just wanted to know which one was mine. So the attorney said something to the nurse, and I figured she was going to point out which was our baby. Only instead, from the back of the nursery came another nurse carrying a newborn wrapped in a new pink blanket. That was our baby. And I have to tell you, she was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen in my life. Now, was she really beautiful? Who knows? But she certainly was beautiful to us. The next day, we went to court. We did everything we had to do, and we brought her home. Now, I have to tell you that in the months that we were waiting for that phone call, I had an opportunity to talk to a surgeon about having a procedure that maybe would help me get pregnant. And I said to the surgeon, I don't know what to do. We're supposed to adopt a baby. And the surgeon said to me, Maris, this procedure only works half the time anyway. And if you do get pregnant, it won't be for probably a year or more. So have the procedure and go adopt your baby. Well, would you like me to tell you the sequence of events? I had the surgery in September. We picked up our daughter in November. I became pregnant in January. And 10 months and 3 weeks after our daughter was born, our son was born. So now we had 2 babies. Now, why am I telling you this? Because of words. Because we never imagined in a million years that we would hear the words that we heard when we entered this new world of having a baby by birth and a baby by adoption. I mean, people said really strange things. It was not nice words. When our son was born, somebody said to me, well, aren't you sorry you didn't wait a little longer? In other words, why did we bother going to Seattle? And then worse than that, somebody else said to me, well, you're going to give that girl back now, aren't you, now that you have your own child? Incredible, as though our daughter were any less my own child than our son was. People were just amazing. We ended up adding a 3rd child to our family by adoption. We had 2 babies in a year. I didn't want another baby. So we did what in those years was considered a very brave act. We adopted what was then an older child. I wrote a letter and sent an application to a big international adoption agency, and we got a referral of a 3-year-old girl from Korea who needed a family. Now, it's not like today. Today, when you get an international referral, you get a photo album, you get a video, you get a file of medical to bring to your pediatrician. Not then. We got a couple of pages of information, which was fine with us, and one little picture, like a mugshot of this little girl with a very serious face. It was enough for us. I immediately wrote back to that agency, said, yep, we'll take her, absolutely, she's ours. And then we waited for her to come to America. Well, it was the end of the Vietnam War, and it took a really long time. We ended up going to Kennedy Airport probably 6 or 7 months later. And by coincidence, it was a friend of ours who was the volunteer who was bringing her off the plane. So as they were walking toward us, my husband and I were both there, I wasn't really worried about whether I would bond with her or whether having a 3-year-old to start was the same as having a newborn. What struck me was that she wasn't bringing me some new child, some stranger who was just coming into our family. She was bringing us our daughter, who had been our daughter for 6 months already and was just finally coming home. Now, there we were, an interesting family. Don't you think somebody didn't say something? Those words again? Somebody actually said to me, well, Maris, it's obvious that you love all 3 of your children, but didn't you feel just a little bit different when your son was born? After all, he's your blood. Now, I would have liked to have had the words right then and there to answer people like that and to tell them how I felt about my children. But I didn't have I, who love words, did not have the words for years to really know how to answer people. And it didn't stop. Here, fast forward 25 years. Our 3 children are terrific. They all grew up great, and they all got married. Imagine 3 out of 3, which is in itself astounding. And our son, who is our birth child, married a woman who had been adopted as a baby. So we had 2 adopted daughters and an adopted daughter-in-law, who in fact has truly become our 3rd daughter. And all of them decided they wanted to start a family. Well, you know what I said. Don't you want to adopt? And in essence, all 3 women answered me the same way. Oh, Mom, we want to have a baby. Rightfully so. And they did. In the course of 15 months, each of those 3 women gave birth to a baby girl. So now we had these 3 incredible, delicious granddaughters. Not genetically related to each other, don't look anything like each other, but they're close cousins. They talk to each other, they laugh with each other, they play with each other, they love each other. And all the rest of that stuff is just details that they don't care about. Well, don't you think somebody didn't say something to me about them? Somebody actually said to me, Maris, it's obvious that you love all 3 of your grandchildren, but didn't you feel just a little bit different when your son's wife had a baby? After all, that one's your blood. Incredible what people say. Anyway, as our kids got bigger, I went back to school and I became a social worker and I started to do work with an adoption agency. I loved doing adoption work because I was bringing other people to the place where I was. And then a bunch of us who did this work together decided that we wanted to open our own adoption agency. We wanted to place babies and really older children. Now, obviously, some of the motivation was, the good stuff from my own life. But it was more than that. We wanted to make sure that these older kids didn't have to wait so long for a family. And we wanted to do it the best possible way. And I have to tell you, we did. We opened our own adoption agency, Family Focus, in Queens, and it's still going strong all these years later. But we had to plan it from the beginning. So there we were, sitting around thinking, well, what should we say to people who come in the door? After all, people come in, they don't know what adoption is. We have to be able to explain it to them so that they can decide if it's even something they want to do. So I was going to be the trainer of these new families because I was a teacher. And I already knew in my head what I would say to new people. Listen, adoption isn't just when you go to court and a judge signs papers. And it isn't just when a social worker comes to your house and writes a report and you give all this documentation and paperwork. Adoption is different, and it's way more than that. And that's when I came on a word, the best word, and actually the word that had probably been inside of me all of those years. We were sitting, planning it, and I was talking about my own life, and all of a sudden it popped right out of my mouth. I said, I know what adoption is. It's just a claim you make. You claim your child, and it's forever. And that's it. Everybody in the room picked up on the power of that word right away. And in fact, we've been using it in our training in all these years since. And I'll tell you that all adoptive parents understand it. Because what it is saying is that we claim our children exactly the way birth parents claim their birth children. And I'll tell you who else understands it, step-parents. Many step-parents can never go to court to legally claim their stepchildren, but in their hearts, they absolutely claim them, and that's forever too. And adoptive parents don't only have to claim babies. A woman once came to our agency who wanted to adopt really an older child, not like my 3-year-old. And she looked in a picture book of children who needed to be adopted, and she saw a teenage boy who really needed a family. He had some learning disabilities, he had some medical issues, but mostly he had had many, many disappointments in his life. She liked him, she read his materials, she asked if she could meet him. We introduced them, they got along really well. She visited with him a very long time until he felt comfortable enough to move into her house. He moved in, and they went to court, and she adopted him. 2 years later, I happened to bump into her at a conference. After we did this whole big hello, this mutual hello, I said to her, so how's Larry? Oh, she said, and she reached into her giant pocketbook and pulled out one of those little plastic photo albums, the kind that new mothers and new grandmothers used to have before everybody put their pictures in a smartphone. And she said, look, Larry graduated from high school. Here's his picture. And here he went to the prom. Look at his tuxedo. And here he is in his uniform working in McDonald's. And I realized this was a new mother who had claimed her baby. Didn't matter that he was 18 years old. He was her baby. And she was one happy woman. So did I ever claim my baby that died? Or did I remain forever disconnected? Of course I claimed him, absolutely. I realized long, long ago that he is every bit as much my child as all of the others. And as far as that ridiculous question, can you love a child you didn't create as much as you love your blood child? I have an answer for that too now, and it's really simple. There's no such thing as much as, because love is not measurable. Our children, all of our children, are claimed by us, and that's it. What's ours is ours. And that's my last word. Thank you very much.